All right. Hope everybody is having a good night and you can hear me. Um, Welcome to the Rooftops of America live stream, the every other Sunday Rooftops of America live stream. It is February 23rd. I am your host, of course, Scott Thaler. With me tonight is this tasty Jolly Scott Scottish style ale out of Appalachian Brewing Company. Looks pretty good in the glass. And it is, it's not a Scotch ale, so it's not as heavy. It's the lighter Scottish style, 80 shilling. I used to know what that rating was, but I couldn't tell you right now. So I hope everybody's doing well. And we're almost through February, which for me is the longest month of the year. On account that February is a tough month usually for me. But I decided to take since my high pointing plans, like I mentioned last time, have sort of been upended for this particular year. I decided to take a slightly different approach with tonight's live stream and talk a little bit about my high pointing bucket list. Sort of the ones that aren't on the 56 ones I'd like to do in the US, or, the UK, things like that. Some of the big plans I have. There is an exception, one or two exceptions on this. And some of them we've talked about before, but I don't think I've ever really, and this isn't the complete list. This is just the ones I feel like I could sort of get through in the time we have here today. So I would be very curious to know what your particular high pointing bucket list looked like. The way I defined it was ones that aren't necessarily planned or not necessarily things that I've sort of set myself to do. Like I said, there is an exception or two. So to start out, and some of these actually are probably really attainable, and I just haven't done them yet. And others of them are a lot more pie in the sky sort of thing. So let me check the chat before I start into this process. Hey Pretzel, how you doing? Glad you're here. Bill, thank you for being here. CTOS, good evening to you as well. Traveling Ron Man, good evening to you. So my high pointing bucket list. I'm so to set the stage, number 10. Actually, there's more than 10 on here, but the one I have first on the list, which is probably the most attainable out of all of them, because I have a reason to go there, and I just haven't done it yet, is Pearson Hill in Wisconsin. It's the second highest point in Wisconsin. It's only a short distance away from Timms Hill. In fact, if you're standing on the tower, you can see Pearson Hill. There is a long running local dispute on which one is actually higher between Timms Hill and Pearson Hill. There are locals in Price County that will swear Pearson Hill is actually taller. And so I feel I sort of need to go up Pearson Hill at some point. Why I haven't? I just haven't, which is sort of unexcusable. So the next time I plan to get back to Wisconsin to see my family, and I normally always go visit Timms Hill, I might make an exception and do Pearson Hill instead. And you guys will definitely know about it if I do. Another one that's on the list of probably going to happen, if I can make it work when I refilm Oklahoma, I do think I want to bag, is it Kavanaugh Hill? Kavanaugh? I'm going to say Kavanaugh Hill. The world's quote-unquote tallest hill. I know that's a bit of a misnomer, but I figured, you know, they went all in on that. And as a high pointer, sometimes you got to embrace the kitsch of the whole thing. So Kavanaugh Hill is on the list. What makes it interesting is there's no real reason for me to go to that part of Oklahoma. So I got to work for it. Like there's going to have to be something else that takes me there. Um, Another one that I've talked about before, and I've always hoped to do, if I ever can get around to doing Rooftops of Japan, this is a given, would be Mount Fuji. Along with Mount Fuji is the Okinawa High Point as well, which is actually not on the main island of Okinawa. And I can't think of the name. I didn't write it down on my list. But I look back at the year I spent on Okinawa back in 94 to 95 with the Marine Corps. I look back on that time as it was really enjoyable. And I always have sort of wanted to go back to Okinawa. And if I go back, I'd like to bag the highest point both on Okinawa and the actual Okinawan island high point. Islands, I should say. But Mount Fuji, of course, is Mount Fuji and everything that goes with it. And I just think I've always thought that is a absolutely stunning peak, gorgeous mountain. And it's on the list. It's a list. I would be very happy to summit Mount Fuji. I see in the comments 7 summits. Speaking of that, the only 7 summits that really captivate my attention, besides Denali, is one I've talked about before, Mount Vinson in Antarctica. I have had a lifelong fascination with Antarctica. I'm not sure why. But I just think it is I just think it's such an adventure to do that. And to be able to go to the top of Mount Vinson would be epic. Like that would be a nice feather in the hat. I feel like I could do Kilimanjaro. I feel like in Australia at Mount Cusco, I'm sure I said Thaddeus's name wrong. But I feel like those are more possible than, say, something like Mount Vinson. Like that requires some planning and some dedication. So it's on the bucket list. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it would be really, really cool if it did. Going to Antarctica that'd be an awesome experience. I think I'd really like that. Another one on the list is Mount Olympus, partially because I think Greece is awesome. Ancient Greece has been a fascination of mine, and it's Mount Olympus. It's the home of the gods, and everything that goes with it. And I think that would be quite the hike with all the history that goes on. Like going to Greece, by extension, I'd also like to hit the tallest mountain on the island of Crete too, which the name escapes me right now because I didn't put it on my list. But I feel like Mount Olympus would be pretty wild, pretty awesome, and doable. I just haven't really, it's on the bucket list. It would be really cool. I haven't really given it as much thought as I would like, but I do think it would be pretty interesting. We're just working right down this list really quick. I also think, speaking of in the realm of possibility, is a Zugspitze in Germany, which, can be done very easily if you get down there into that part of southern Germany, and you could take the cable car all the way up. I don't know if I'd necessarily do that. It really depended on how much time I had available. Um, you know, I don't need a reason necessarily to go to Germany. I just never have been to Germany, and I've wanted to go, and I just haven't. So maybe that's another one that can be checked off relatively quick. It's a gorgeous peak. That part of Germany is absolutely stunning. So, at least all the photos I've seen of it, and the people that I know that have visited down there have said it's just amazing. So, I do have friends in Germany, and I could make this work. But right now, it is firmly on the bucket list. Um, I feel if I do something like that, there's probably going to be one or two other things that crop up on the list there as well. Um, Partially because my ancestry, if you trace the Marthaler name back, you end up taking a fun tour into Germany and then down into Switzerland. So if I was going to do Zugspitz, I'd probably tie it into something like exploring the history of Marthalers and things of that nature. Which, when you talk about Switzerland, you end up talking about Mont Blanc, and I don't really have much desire to climb that particular peak. So, we're going down the list. Let me see what we got in the comments here. Most of the national park. It sounds like a dangerous hike. I'm assuming you mean um, I'm not sure. Steven, nice for you to be here. Thank you. If you get to the summit of Denali, then you can start thinking about Vincent. Vincent is very expensive. Yeah, and honestly, just getting to Antarctica is very expensive. I think I've told this before, but at one point, a couple decades ago, I seriously was looking at doing trying to get one of the logistics jobs at McMurdo and doing a winter over. That did not go through. I ended up getting hired as a consultant. So, traveling around, man, I have Mount Nittany on that list. As a Penn State grad, it looms over the town of State College. It's not the tallest of anything, but just something I've always wanted to. When you decide to do that, Ron, let me know. I'd go with you on that. That would be pretty cool. I recently saw a channel completing the Annapurna circuit close to Mount Everest. I think they had guides at some point. Yeah, there are folks I've known that have done Himalayan peaks, and that's a whole nother level. RMI has Vincent listed for $54,000, which I don't have right now. That's an investment. But Stephen, actually, the fact that there's a price figure actually gives me something to work towards. Because honestly, I had no knowledge, because I've never really priced it out. It's always been this sort of fantastical thing in my head of what it, just, looking at pictures and just imagining things like that. So it's really cool to know, all of a sudden there is a price figure. Doi Intathon, highest point in Thailand is a drive up. Beautiful temple on top and very popular. Been there a couple times. That's awesome, Bill. I did not know that. That's really cool. Hike with Mike. Nice for you to be here. Thank you. I hope all is going well in Florida. Like I said, for folks that are just jumping on, I'm going through, since my high pointing plans, as I mentioned last time, has sort of been upended this year. I'm talking about my high pointing bucket list. Places that I've always sort of, wrote down, like I should get there at some point, and I just haven't yet. And so some of them are more realistic than others. Um, there's more on this particular list that I haven't really I'm probably not going to get in tonight, but will for another time. But going on, and to tie off what Bill said, down in near Thailand, across on the other side, is Vietnam and Fanispan. That particular peak. Vietnam has been on my list to go visit for years. Uh, the food's amazing. The people are amazing. There's a lot of history there. Um, and it, from the friends I've had that have visited, say it is absolutely gorgeous, beautiful place. And Fanspan is, I know I'm saying it wrong. I know I'm saying it wrong. Would be a really cool peak from what I've read about it and pictures I've seen of it. Um, I think it would be quite the journey. A good way to sort of put a wrap up a great Vietnamese adventure. So, um, another particular place I've always wanted to go and I just haven't is Morocco. I'm not sure what it is about Morocco, but I've been fascinated with that particular country since like grade school. Um, I don't think I ever had to write a report on it. I'm not sure why, but it has always stuck in my head for some reason that the first country to ever recognize the United States as a sovereign nation was Morocco. And so that stayed with me. And I feel like going and climbing um, Tobcall um, would be pretty cool. I don't think it's in the Anti-Atlas. I think it's actually in the Atlas Mountains near Marrakesh. But there's this sort of, I don't know, I've got this romantic image. It's probably from watching Casablanca way too many times. Um, and if you haven't seen Casablanca, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite movies. uh, and but and I know none of that's realistic, but I do think it would be pretty awesome to get over to Morocco and go climb a mountain, um, and then enjoy the markets and everything else about that wonderful country. So, running back stateside, um, let's see, most of being from a wet and swampy environment, my bucket list would be the opposite habitat, the desert to hike and camp. Mike, I tell you what, you need to head out to um, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, way out west Texas. Uh, there's some great camping and hiking out in that area. So, yes, definitely hit the like button. Fun fact: Morocco's the highest average age of every place on the planet. I did not know that. The most beautiful place I've ever hiked was Alaska in the summertime. Wouldn't want to be there in the winter. And honestly, certain parts of the summer you might not want to be there as well because the bugs can get pretty vicious. My niece spent several weeks up there hiking in the Brooks Range, and it was, by all accounts, one of the best experiences of her life. Just an incredible experience backpacking through the Brooks Range. So, surprisingly, Alaska is on the list of places I have not. There's very few states I've never been to. Alaska is one of them. So, um, are there class 3 and below hikes for the 40? What about? Um, I'd have to do some research into that. I don't have an answer for you right now off the top of my head, Pretzel. Um, and I wouldn't be able to comment on Denali because I haven't really looked at Denali lately. So, if other folks in the chat know, that would be, um, feel free to toss that information in. Getting back to my bucket list, here's where it gets a little ridiculous. Um, Going back to the States, there is, so I've had this, I still have this hope of getting to Nassau Island, um, which is off the coast between Haiti and Jamaica, and it is a U.S. It is it has the highest. It's the highest point of the um, minor outlying territories. So that's not actually on the bucket list because I still think I'll be able to get to it. Of the U.S. minor or outlying islands, I think. So Nassau Island and its high point, I still hope I can figure some way to get to. Now, the one that is probably never going to be, would be, I'd have to really find, maybe I can get a job with the Nature Conservancy and figure it out. But Palmyra Atoll, on the other hand, um, is the only incorporated unorganized territory in the U.S., and it's in the middle of nowhere. Like, if you're looking at the Pacific, you have Hawaii, and then if you go almost due south, you have Palmyra Atoll, about 1,000 miles south of it. So it's about a third of the way to American Samoa, which just goes to show how vast the Pacific Ocean is. And it's just this little thing there. I think the highest elevation is like 30 feet, maybe less. It's not much. But that is definitely on the bucket list. It's one of these ones where at one point when I had started this series and I was just being ridiculous about the whole thing, like, oh, I could do all this, and that was one I was literally like, it was the first sort of inclination that I had that maybe, just maybe, I should sort of curb it back a bit and not promise, I'm going to go to like some of these, like the Pacific Islands, the U.S. minor islands, or outlying islands in the Pacific are um, feats of logistical, like they would be logistical feats to get to some of these places. And I'm not talking about like Midway. Midway is probably the most doable of them all, simply for the World War II connection. So you'd probably be able to figure out how to get, spend a good deal of money in getting on a tour to get a trip to Midway, at least. But places like Palmyra Atoll, which are, now very conserved area, with only scientists and, people that are supporting that scientific effort on that atoll are getting there. But, there is a limit to some of these. And that was the one that sort of is like, nope, nope. I feel like it would be great to do it. You'd never hear me stop talking about the time I went to Palmyra Atoll, because I feel like it would be quite the journey to get there and then go stand on top of a high point that's like 30 feet. So that's probably the most, in the US, that is probably the one that is most far-fetched. And then, running back, speaking of Nassau Island, but in the Caribbean, Pico Dorate in the Dominican Republic, that one's probably pretty doable. I just got to sort of plan it out. But the highest point in the Caribbean would be definitely worth bagging. I've read quite a bit about it. I know other folks have done it and had a good experience with it. And I think it would be, that's actually, I should have rated these. I should have, like, on the scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being easiest, 5 being outrageous. That's probably a 2. So let me go back real quick. Pearson Hill, Wisconsin, 1. Definitely going to happen. Kavanaugh Hill, probably a 2. Need a reason to get to that part of Oklahoma. Palmyra Atoll, we'll call that a 5. Mount Fuji, Japan, 3. Mount Vincent, Antarctica, we'll rate that one a 5. Mount Olympus, Greece, 4. Zugspitze, Germany, 3. Fansipan, Vietnam, 4. Pico Dorate, Dominican Republic. Did I say 2? 2 or 3? Uh, we'll call it a 2. I think I could actually make that one happen. Tobcal, Morocco, 3. And then there's only 2 more that I have on the list right now to add. So I'll lead with the one I've talked about before. I've talked a lot about it before. Like the peak I want to do. I have no real desire to do all 7 summits. I'll get 1 or 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, but I'm never going to do all of them. I have no desire to do Everest, but I do very much have a desire to do Chimborazo, which I know I'm probably mispronouncing it. Somebody has corrected me before. But Chimborazo in Ecuador, to me, is the peak. If to go to the closest you can be to the sun on Earth is that peak, and I think it would be awesome. It's also a lot more doable than, say, something like Everest. Everest will kill you. There is a death zone on Everest, and I'm a little long in the tooth for something like that. Whereas Chimborazo, I think that could happen. I've had friends who have expatted in Ecuador. So there's some connections already that exist. I'd rate it a 3 because the desire is there as well. Like when you're looking like the things on the list, like if I have to prioritize, this one definitely is the desire is there. Like this would be, I could capstone my career with this peak and walk away happy. Like if they said, if you can only, once you're done with the US, you can only do 1 more peak, this would be the one I'd want to do. Because I'd love to be able to at least have some sort of claim that I stood on. I was the closest to the sun you're ever going to get on this planet. So, yeah, that would be the one, Chimborazo. So we'll rate that. Did I say a 3? Yeah, I think that's right. We'll say 3. And then there's only one other one. And this one is probably the most ridiculous of all of them, for a variety of reasons. I've been to this place before, and I thought about this even when I was there. God, 20? That can't be right. Over 25 years ago? Shit. Wow, excuse me. Sorry. But Ryan Island, the highest point on Ryan Island. And if you're not familiar where Ryan Island is, then I would recommend you consult a map of Lake Superior. And in Lake Superior, you will see up in the northwest Isle Royale. And on Isle Royale, there's a really big lake. And in that really big lake is an island named Ryan Island. And I'd love to be able to do that highpointing. Because technically, Ryan Island is the largest island and the largest lake and the largest island and the largest freshwater lake in the world. And to take it one step further, if you time it right, there is a seasonal body of water on Ryan Island named Moose Flats. And you know what's in the middle of Moose Flats? There's a boulder that you could stand on to take it one ridiculous step further. And I feel like I love the weird things. I love part of the reason I love high pointing so much is because it's just sometimes when you look at some of the places we go to, they're just a little ridiculous. And I love them all for that. But this right here, this particular thing sort of sums up, in my mind, it really gets to the absurdity of it all. And I love that. Um, Having been to IR a couple times, this one I would actually rate it a 2 because I've been to the island. I know how to get there. I actually have considered the next time I get up to Minnesota to refilm Eagle Mountain of taking the ferry out of Grand Marais um, and heading back over to IR and then beating feet down the Greenstone to get there. Um, and it could probably be done. I'd have to figure out the hardest part is getting to Ryan Island. Um, Not getting to IR, but once you're on IR, getting to Ryan Island. So I'd have to find a way. I'd have to. There are some logistics that got to be worked out. Um, so, but yes, that to me is one of really would be. It's so absurd that I love it. I love it all the way through. So, okay, let's see. Lots of moose. They really are more dangerous than bears. There are a good share of moose on the island, but they'll leave you alone if you leave them alone. Just don't get between a moose and her offspring. Um, but they're one of the most impressive things. Like when I saw um, coming out of Siskiwit Bay years ago, and this is God, over 2 decades, 25 plus years ago. I've never forgotten this. But watching a full bull moose swim out of Siskiwit Bay, and we were about a quarter mile away, and still that thing was massive. It was, you ain't seen nothing like a moose. They're just incredibly massive. And that was cool. That was really cool. Also really cool is in that particular area that we were camping, the time we were there, all the wild strawberries were ripe. And some of the best pancakes I ever had in my life for the next morning because we picked 2 Nalgene bottles full of wild strawberries and we used them. We cooked up the best strawberry pancakes I've ever had. So, sidebar, way off topic, but that's sort of my high pointing bucket list. There's more on there of other places. Some of them, I thought of the whole like what particular spots in the UK could have been on there, but I've actually sketched most of that out, and I fully intend to do the UK stuff. That those those are gonna happen, um, and then I'm sure there's places I've forgotten too, um, but these are the ones that there's something more to them. I feel like there's some I don't know. There is either a lifelong fascination with a particular country they're in, or just take the absurdity to a little level, another level. Like Kavanaugh Hill is another great example of the world's tallest hill. It's not, but there's some kitsch there, and I like that. I appreciate that. Um, so being from Florida, the highest peak I hiked was around 290 feet. We got to get you out, Mike. You gotta hit Britton Hill up. Go up to um, Walton County. Go up in the Panhandle and hit up Britton Hill. Uh, I'd like to say you won't regret it. Go up in the Panhandle and hit up Britton Hill. Uh, I'd like to say you won't regret it, but I have a feeling You'll get there and you'll be like, I drove all this way for this. In defense of Britton Hill, though, it does have a pretty decent view. I recommend folks get there earlier in the morning because then you'll get lucky and you'll get like the fun mist foggy thing going. Pretzel, was that picture real where one of our presidents is riding a moose? I'd have to see the picture again. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if there was a picture of Theodore Roosevelt, the bull moose, as his nickname was, riding a moose. That would not surprise me one bit. Moose are huge. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me one bit on the legitimacy of that picture. It totally is something I could see him doing. So, in other things, since I've spent a lot of time rambling on about my bucket list, what else has gone on? Let me get you up to speed on other things. So, I really wanted Alabama out before President's Day weekend. Didn't happen. Like I said, life's been weird right now, but I'm working on it. Voiceover's all recorded, all laid in. Editing's coming along. I'd say I'm about 75% done. I still got to put the music tracks on, and still got to find a little more imagery and tighten things up. But overall, Alabama's looking pretty good. I think it's going to be a pretty decent episode. California is still in the works, and then that'll be the one following this. And series is back on the docket and is being worked. Along with that, I've also been all in on the Fearsome Critters stuff. I've got 3 stories/episodes written and 4 more on the way in various stages of completion. Some at like 90%, others a little bit more rough, one in outline. But the inspiration is there, and since it is there, I'm going all in. And speaking of which, I actually have Fearsome Critters stickers on the way. So, I should say not on the way, I got 100 in the other day. But that's it. You can see a little bit closer. I'll post that image on the actual Fearsome Critters channel at some point in the very near future. Perhaps tomorrow. So that is starting to take shape, and I'm still very excited about that. I think that's going to be a nice change of pace, and also because I can't go do the stuff I wanted to do, it'll keep me occupied, keep me busy. So, yes, I climbed the challenging peak known as Britton Hill. That being said, there's some big sandhills in the Green Swamp, and I'm heading there. Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. There is... Florida's got some interesting geology to it. It's a fascinating... It's fascinating to me that one of the facts about Florida that is most interesting is Florida as a body of whole, what we call Florida, the peninsula and all that, has actually spent most of its existence underwater, and only has been surfaced four times for various points. And speaking of, I think it's David McCullough has a book called Theodore Rex. I read it a while back being like over 10 years ago. I remember it being an interesting read. Teddy Roosevelt shows up a lot when you start looking at high points, state high points. Why? Because he was really instrumental in, the creation of national parks, national forests. And so a lot of these high points in those protected areas, are not there because of him, but are in those areas because of his efforts. So he's a fascinating guy. It's interesting with Roosevelt. He's an interesting dude. Okay, but that's where everything stands right now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll see Alabama very soon. It's about 3 times longer. Well, I shouldn't say. Yeah, that makes sense. It's about 33 minutes. It'll be about 33 to 36 minutes, depending on how things shake out. And we'll go from there. I wonder how many high points John Muir climbed. I'm pretty sure he did Whitney. We know that. Muir's interesting to me because when he showed up in San Francisco, or I think that's where he ported, and he set off to the Sierra Nevada, I don't think he ever looked back. Like, he was so enraptured with the Sierra Nevada range, like that became his lifelong thing. I would be very curious to know, that's actually worth looking into, how many. I know, like, we know one for sure, but beyond that, that's a good question, Stephen. What's the hardest hike I've ever done, high point or otherwise? High pointing wise, I've talked about it before. Boundary Peak was rough. Marcy was rough for different reasons, but Boundary is the one I got altitude sickness on. That was just a slog. That was a tough day. But looking back through life, in the beginning, like the first hardest hike I can remember, it wasn't really much of a hike, but it was the Grim Reaper on Camp Pendleton during boot camp. That was a 12-mile thing, and that was the first sort of really moving out with a purpose, but you're with everybody else. But yeah, that was interesting. I bet you now, I'd like to, speaking of, that would actually be interesting to be able to go back on Camp Pendleton and hit the highest point on Camp Pendleton, and also to re-hike the Grim Reaper or Mount MFR, and Recon Ridge. It would be interesting to go back and experience those again, but it's been 30 years. So I don't know. I might be like, nope, still sucks. Still sucks. But I remember that as a kid. There I was, 18 years old. I mean, I'd hiked in the Porcupine Mountains, as a kid, but I'd never had to deal with any elevation like that before. And even now, I'm like, I don't think that's actually probably much elevation compared to what some of the stuff I've done. But for an 18-year-old kid fresh off the farm in Wisconsin, that was something else. So, I was fine on Whitney. We stayed at I didn't have any issues the whole time. Whitney was just long, but it was very doable. The grade, I mean, I might have a different perspective if we did the Mountaineers route, but going the standard route, you're just grinding. You're grinding. The hardest part of Whitney, honestly, was repacking our gear at trail camp after we'd summited, then putting packs on and hiking back down the mountain that same day. Just that constant down, that actually sucked more than some of the other stuff. So, yeah, that's that. Anyway, this has been I appreciate you all being here and indulging me a bit as I went through some of this. Like I said, I'd love to know yours. Those that threw some on there, that's great. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you guys again in 2 weeks. Did you take the Whitney Trail up? If yes, are there any huge drop offs on that trail? Um, there's no, yes, but there are some big drop offs, but the trail is, it's not, how do I want to phrase this? Just be in the present. It's not, um, yes, there are certain parts as you're working around the spires where you're like, that sort of sucks. But the trail's fairly wide. Like it is a good trail. Okay. Anyway, um, no, it isn't a narrow trail. I mean, it's not a double wide. It's not like you're doing South Dakota. Like, but it's, remember, this is a trail that was carved for pack animals. So there is some space. And that's what makes the standard route relatively easy to negotiate, um, because it is a trail that was literally cut for pack animals. So, all right. On that note, thanks all for being here, and I will see you guys in. Wow, I'll see you guys in March. So, I'll talk to you all later. Later.